Hey everyone, welcome to Moving Matt. We do vlogs, travel, and some camera stuff. And today I was going to talk about the kind of insane news coming out of Canon Rumors that the Canon EOS R1 is not even going to be coming this year. And of course this is just a rumor, hence Canon Rumors, but they are saying it's from a pretty reliable source, and I'll probably, link the article below and maybe put the quote up here. But the general gist of the quote is that the EOS R1 is actually not coming this year. It'll probably more likely come in early 2022, but apparently even though that the R1 isn't coming, there is another exciting camera coming from Canon this year. So first I want to talk about whether I think this is actually true, why this may be true, and also what that exciting camera may be. I wanted to get outside today because, it's a beautiful day, spring is in the air, and it is called Moving Matt, so I might as well move while I talk about cameras. First off, is the rumor that the R1 isn't coming in 2021 even a valid rumor? Should we be really considering it at all? Well, there's a couple reasons maybe we shouldn't, and the first reason would be, well, it kind of contradicts everything that we've been hearing prior to this rumor. Also, there's been a lot of rumored specs about the R1 already, and now we're supposed to expect that it's not really even going to be coming this year. Another big reason to doubt this rumor is that at least right now, the Summer Olympics are happening in Tokyo this year. And it seems a little odd that Canon would not have a flagship camera to go along with the Tokyo Olympics, especially considering that the Sony A1 has came out already, along with a development announcement from Nikon saying that they are working on a Z9. So if they're both going to have a flagship camera at the Olympics, is Canon not going to have a flagship camera at the Olympics? Holy shit, that scared the whoo. So are we supposed to believe that Canon is not going to have a flagship or a new flagship presence at the Olympics and Nikon and Sony are? Well, that's a pretty big reason not to believe. But there is another big reason that maybe this rumor is true. I gotta say, this is kind of an odd composition, but I'm kind of digging it. Okay, so a reason to believe that this rumor about the R1 not coming in 2021 might actually be true is because this is a CR2 coming from Canon Rumors. And so he's saying he's getting it from a really reliable source. Canon Rumors are usually fairly spot on and good with their sources. A CR3 is like, this is a guaranteed fact. And a CR2 is saying that he's getting it from very reliable sources who have been correct in the past. And this is ranked at a CR2, which means that it has some credibility. Another reason to believe this might be true is because of the supply chain issues that we've been hearing about a whole lot, and that is one of the reasons he's giving that the R1 will not be coming. So the biggest reason that I think this rumor might be true, and also maybe leads to the identity of this new camera that they're talking about that is going to be very exciting, is we've been hearing for a while that Canon wanted to take back the high resolution crown from Sony and Sony's 64 megapixel sensor. So we've heard speculations maybe of an 80 megapixel sensor, a 90 megapixel sensor, somewhere in that range. And we have all heard and believed, and there's been good rumors to suggest that a high resolution version of the R5 is actually coming. And then recently we started getting rumors that the Canon R1 was going to have some specs that really didn't make sense for a fast action sports photography camera. We heard about an 85 megapixel sensor being capable of shooting 20 frames per second and up to 40 frames per second at a lower resolution, as well as some other fairly outlandish claims about a camera coming down the line. And most people agreed that this sounded like outlandish rumors, that it didn't really make sense for an R1 to have this. And then some people actually thought, hey, maybe this is legit. So I kind of think that there might be two things going on. I think that the rumored specs that they were talking about for this R1 is actually maybe a mixture of specs from the R1 with maybe this high resolution camera of the R5, let's call it R5s, in the vein of 5DS, which it's going to be really extremely confusing to talk about. The Canon camera, the 5DS is high resolution, and then the S on the Sony is, high sensitivity. Anyways, I digress. But that would make a lot of sense if they were mixing these two possible specs together, because first off, Saying that Canon is going to come out with an 85 megapixel global shutter camera right now is absolutely insane. It would be awesome if the R1 really was 85 megapixels with a global shutter, but to me, that sounds like that's fairly far out of reach, at least this year, maybe next year or the year after, but it just doesn't really feel like that is possible with the current bodies and processing power that we have for a small body like that. And so maybe the global shutter part is true, but it's not gonna be for an 85 megapixel sensor. Maybe it's gonna be for whatever the R1 has next year, maybe probably somewhere in that 45 megapixel range to still give it that 8K, and it really is gonna be a global shutter. But there is gonna be this 85 megapixel sensor coming out for the high resolution version. And maybe those two different rumors being put together is what got that weird, crazy camera that we've been hearing about. The other thing is, I think that 20 frames per second on that 85 megapixel sensor really isn't out of the question, especially if you consider that the R5 is already shooting 8K RAW. It's really processing almost as much data as would be needed. And if they have a slightly better processor than what's already in the R5 and they bring it to this new camera, maybe it really can get 20 frames per second electronic and the 12 frames per second mechanical. Another thing that's interesting about those specs that were released is they did not say anything about video on the R1. And I know that primarily the R1 is going to be a fast action sports photography camera, but the R1 usually, or at least the one series of cameras, usually has a little bit better specs than the 5 series of cameras when it comes to video. And the fact that they didn't even mention video in it at all was kind of a little odd to me. But one thing they always have said about this supposedly high resolution R5 is that it's definitely not focusing on video, and for that reason they would not put that in the spec list whatsoever. So of course that still does leave us with the big question of, will Canon be missing out if they do not have a high action sports camera at the Olympics? And to that I say, maybe. So it's possible that there actually still will be a prototype of the R1 at the Olympics, even if it's not coming out until early of 2022. But the other thing is, maybe this R5s is actually capable enough to be a sports photography camera at the Olympics. Yes, the A1 is an incredible camera, but on a lot of the autofocusing tests, the R5 is keeping up with it. And no, it's not shooting maybe quite as fast as the A1, and there's a lot of benefits to the A1, but they're very comparable in a lot of different ways. And so if you could get an 85 megapixel camera that actually shoots just as good as the R5, even though maybe it wouldn't be quite as fast as the A1, that might be something that people want to shoot with at the Olympics, because the autofocus is already incredible, and now you have an 85 megapixel sensor. And so maybe they think that that's enough, along with maybe a few prototypes for very specific people. Maybe that's possible. And so that's what I think. It's one of these two cameras. It's either going to be the high resolution version of the R5, and I think a lot of the specs actually make sense when we start to think about it that way, or this is completely wrong and the R1 really is coming out this year for the Olympics and it's going to be ready. Those are the two options that I see most likely in my mind. But what do you think about this rumor? Do you actually think that this makes sense and that this is going to be the high resolution version of the R5 coming out? Or do you think this rumor sounds ridiculous? We've been hearing a lot about the R1 already. It's definitely the R1 coming first, and that's going to be out ready for the Olympics. So drop in the comment section below and give me your thoughts. And if you've liked this video, maybe me getting outside a little bit more and talking about cameras still, but not doing it in the studio, be sure to give it a like and consider subscribing. And until next time, peace.